Evening is about to change the talk of the town.
There are 2 to 3 males fighting outside, possibly at Hill Farm Road. Code 3, please.
Officers immediately arrive on scene. They find a man lying face down on the lawn and a teenager with blood dripping from his hand.
Help! Help!
The teenager identified himself as Terrence Mitchell. He was co-captain of the Bloomfield High School football team.
What happened to you?
I got stabbed, but my friend, he's hurt worse.
Okay.
What's your friend's name?
Ronald Taylor.
Ronald. Roll over for me, Ronald. Roll over.
He was injured, lying face down on the lawn.
He has blood all over his clothes.
Ronald, who did this to you?
He did not name his attacker. They did find that there were stab wounds all over him, his arms, his chest, in addition to his back, that he was having difficulty breathing.
Dispatch, you're gonna step the ambulance up. He's losing consciousness.
While an ambulance rushes Ronald Taylor to a local area hospital, detectives question Terrence about the incident.
He said 2 people wearing black sweatpants, black shirt, hoodies, tied tight so he couldn't see who they were, attacked them.
But just what had sparked this bloody attack? The answer will bring investigators face to face with a most
Call was the most devastating call that I've ever had in my life. It was like the whole world just came crashing down.
Born in Bloomfield, Connecticut in 1995, Terrence Mitchell, or TJ as his friends called him, grew up surrounded by love and strong role models.
TJ Mitchell comes from a good family. His mom is a program manager with a Connecticut school organization, and his grandmother works at the Attorney General's office. TJ was a great kid. He
wanted to play football. He was like the all-star.
In fact, Terrence was so talented that by the time he turned 15, he was an integral part of Bloomfield High's powerhouse football team.
Bloomfield High School football has a reputation for being an annual division champion or competitor for the championship.
People looked up to him as a leader. He was a co-captain of the football team and the state leader with interceptions.
By the fall of Terrence's senior year, offers were rolling in for college scholarships.
He was already being offered a division.
Terrence's family was proud of him and the person he was becoming.
As far as everyone in the community was concerned, that success couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
He has nothing but accolades from his coach and others in the community.
He's a popular kid in school ever since we were in middle school, so he was always one of the most talked about things around.
Not surprisingly, among Terrence's throng of admirers was a bevy of the young beauties at Bloomfield High.
Hey, TJ. How's it going?
I'm cool. You want to do something after school?
Yeah, hit me up.
All right, I'll text you later.
All right.
I would tell him that, you're showing shoulders, So, yes, he had several female friends.
Though Terrence was known to be something of a flirt, by his senior year, one special girl had captured his heart. Her name was Brittany Jenkins.
Brittany was a classmate of Terrence's. She was smart, she was cute as a button. They were head over heels for each other.
They had been dating, I believe, maybe about 3 or 4 months.
You going to my game Friday, right?
I wouldn't miss it.
All right, my girl got to be there.
With graduation just around the corner, it looked like everything was coming up
Coaches and staff expect excellence from their players, both academically and as citizens and as athletes.
So when the stress got to be too much, Terrence had one friend outside of school who he could turn to, Ronald, a.k.a. City Taylor.
What up, City?
About time you got here. You ready for this ass whooping?
Nah, I think you the one ready for the ass whooping.
Terrence met Ronald Taylor through Terrence's stepbrother, who is also Ronald Taylor's cousin.
9 years older than Terrence, Ronald seemed to be living every 18-year-old's dream.
City drove fast cars. He liked music, and video games. It was like
You can't beat the best. I'm done playing you, man.
Ronald, he had a great heart. and if he had your back, he got your back.
In fact, Ronald never missed a Bloomfield High football game and had promised Terrence he'd be there to cheer for him on the night of November 22nd, 2013.
All right, man.
All right, you coming to my game, though?
Have I missed one?
Nah, you ain't missed one.
I'll be there.
All right, man.
But now, 24 hours before the big game, Ronald's life hangs in the balance.
He and Terrence Mitchell had allegedly been attacked by several assailants, one of whom was wielding a knife. There was
They do to you, that's that bad.
As investigators begin to piece together what really sparked this horrific attack, they'll uncover a lurid tale unlike anything this quaint town has ever seen before.
He began to lay out a story about the events leading up to this night and about what happened that night. And it's shocking.
For 18-year-old high school senior Terrence T.J. Mitchell, 2013 was supposed to be a year of crowning achievements. A star football player as well as a beautiful girlfriend that worshipped him.
TJ's a young athlete that's going somewhere.
But on November 21st, 2013, one night before Terrence's final regular season game, his bright future is in jeopardy.
Officers responded to a 911 call. When they arrived, Terrence Mitchell and his close friend, Ronald Taylor, had both sustained knife wounds.
Taylor was obviously not in good shape. There was blood all over his clothes, and he had been stabbed in many places on his body.
Ronald was rushed to the hospital. Terrence was treated on the scene.
And it was my cousin calling me, telling me, well, I just got a call. Somebody telling me that Ronald was stabbed. And I'm like, what?
All of his family members, including his friends, rushed down to St. Francis Hospital to check on him and his well-being.
But by the time they arrive, the news is devastating.
He's gone. My mother, when I got there, she ended up telling me that he was dead. I couldn't believe it. Ronald was like my son. I, helped take care of him growing up. It was devastating. It was devastating.
Officially, a homicide investigation.
With a murder investigation now on their hands, detectives turn their attention to the area where the crime occurred.
This attack had occurred outside the home where Terrence was living with his grandmother.
So what do we got here?
I think we found the murder weapon.
They witnessed a snake knife on the ground, and the snake knife was actually broken.
And there's blood droplets leading down the roadway.
Let's go take a look, get some photos.
The blood trail leads detectives to a property across the street and another one up the road. Investigators also observe a black Acura sedan with an open passenger door.
Located a dark sedan, later learned to be that of Ronald Taylor.
They take his car back to the police station and immediately begin to sweep for any type of fingerprints, blood stains, or any other evidence that may give them a clue as to who committed the crime.
But police know their best witness is the other person wounded in the attack, Terrence Mitchell.
You ready to talk about the events that happened tonight?
Yeah, I want to help.
TJ Mitchell reported that on November 21st at about 8 or 8:30 p.m., Ronald Taylor arrived and parked just down the road from TJ's house. TJ went out to the vehicle.
And my grandparents, they don't really approve of us hanging out.
Do you remember anything that happened from the attack tonight?
TJ said he was standing outside the vehicle on the passenger side with the car door open.
They were talking about an upcoming football game. They had seen a car pass, a Nissan Maxima, and he noticed Taylor looking at the car.
Within about 10 minutes, two black males wearing hoodies pulled tighter on their faces such that they couldn't be identified, approached, and without saying a word, began attacking Ronald Taylor. TJ reported that his right little finger, with Ronald and TJ running from their attackers across the street, TJ said he fled back behind his own house.
Soon after, Terrence says he heard Ronald's desperate cries.
TJ went back and found that Ronald had been stabbed.
Given the physical evidence, Terrence's story sounds credible, but there is one thing that doesn't quite wash for detectives.
The Hill Farm area is that upper middle class area. This is not the neighborhood that one would expect to find this type of activity.
What Terrence was describing really sounded like a planned hit, like someone decided to follow Ronald, hunt him down, and...
Bad business dealings.
He was known by the high school age set to be a good supplier for personal use marijuana.
It could have been a situation where Ronald was beefing with some guy with the whole marijuana business, and now finally this guy's caught up to Ronald.
When detectives follow up on this promising lead, the plot only thickens. It seems this wasn't the first time Ronald Taylor had been at the sharp edge of a knife.
Can't trust anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. Your mother, your brother, your lover, anybody. At the end of the day, they're gonna do what they want to do.
27-year-old Ronald City Taylor was attacked and stabbed to death in the streets of Bloomfield, Connecticut.
Allegedly, two males wearing hooded sweatshirts had approached Ronald Taylor and Terrence Mitchell and attacked them.
Now a second victim on the scene, Ronald's friend, local football star Terrence Mitchell, has furnished detectives with a possible motive.
Taylor was known to be in the drug trade. He's a dealer.
He may have been stabbed for some sort of trouble he was having with his marijuana business.
To try and identify if this attack could be drug-related, police combed the surrounding neighborhood.
We were just in the living room. We thought we heard some moaning or
terrible moaning.
something, yeah.
They look outside and they see one individual is on the ground, another individual standing over him.
One reported seeing two males. The second resident of the same home said that she looked outside and saw two, possibly three people running. TJ said he fled back behind his own house, at which point Ronald fell to the ground and was being both punched and stabbed by the attackers.
Were you able to tell what they were wearing?
No, it was too dark.
They didn't know the color of the people. They didn't have...
Maybe there's another way to find Ronald's killer.
A canine was called in to track the two parties involved in this assault.
When a canine track is done, the dog is trained to follow a scent. They start the track from the area where the victims, in this case Terrence Mitchell, says that the suspects were last headed.
As the canine officer works the scene, he soon realizes there's a problem.
With unknown perpetrators, there's no way to identify to that dog that they're following the right track because there's no scent that they're going off of. Ideally, it's the suspect's track, but sometimes they may end up following someone else who had been standing in that general vicinity.
The person's responsible or a vehicle nearby. However, no person or vehicle was discovered by the dog in the area. That track proved inconclusive.
With the canine officer unable to sniff out any new leads, detectives perform a routine background check on Ronald Taylor and make a jaw-dropping discovery.
Wasn't the first time he got stabbed. He was stabbed once before.
Roughly 18 months prior to this particular incident, in the summer of 2012, it turned out Ronald had been stabbed in his own home.
Taylor, according to the police report, he was grinding marijuana and just stabbed him in the side. And apparently he punctured a lung when he did this.
He was transported to the hospital by family members. He recovered from that and then reported the incident to the police department.
An arrest was made. A juvenile was taken into custody for the stabbing of Ronald Taylor.
They transferred this boy's case to juvenile court, and that's closed. So there's no way to get information about the disposition of that case, unfortunately.
Detectives wonder, could this same teen have returned to finish off the job? To find out, they decide to have a chat with a young man, Marcus Jackson.
Had a run-in with Ronald Taylor, a stabbing incident. Have you seen Ronald Taylor since that evening?
No, sir. They told me to stay away from him. That's what I did.
So they looked at Marcus, but his alibi checked out. So once again, they are back at square one.
But this day's not over just yet. And what investigators are about to learn will blow this case wide open and rain down secrets, cold accusations, and just maybe a motive for murder.
What can crush you more than a lifetime of living with everybody knowing you're deep?
For the past 12 hours, detectives in Bloomfield, Connecticut have been investigating the vicious stabbing death of 27-year-old resident Ronald City Taylor.
Ronald and his friend, local football star Terrence Mitchell, were allegedly attacked outside of Terrence's home. There was a legitimate fear this was either drug-related or a targeted crime by another juvenile named Marcus Jackson, who had previously attacked Ronald.
However, as promising as these two leads initially seemed, detectives have yet to find any direct evidence tying Marcus Jackson or anyone else to the crime.
We were sizing up what we had, what we didn't have, which at that time was
evidence recovered from Ronald's car.
We found 2 cell phones at the scene. One was Terrence's and the other was Ronald's.
Investigators immediately begin searching the content from the devices for possible clues.
When I reviewed the text messages on Ronald's phone, Terrence and Ronald had been texting back and forth.
When detectives read the content of these texts, they can't believe their eyes.
They telling each other that they love each other, talking about seeing each other.
There was some ILYs, ILY2, meaning I love you.
It seemed there was a romantic relationship between them.
Before, Terrence seemed lucky to have survived the attack. Quarrel?
They did suspect that TJ may have had something to do with it.
To find out, detectives asked Terrence to come down to the station for a formal interview. There, they confront him about their suspicions.
There's 2 theories going on here. One is there actually were 2 guys that came up and cut you and stabbed. The other theory that's being bounced around is that you and Ron Dale had some sort of issue, kissing contest or whatever it was, or he, wanted you to do something with him that you didn't want to do, and you ended up basically stabbing him yourself. No, sir.
Terrence's initial statement on scene turned to the department.
With Terrence sticking to his story, detectives pulled their trump card.
Yeah, he's dead, right? For real? For real. How close were you to him? Close. How close? Like family close. Family close? Like lover close? Were you guys lovers?
Terrence Mitchell said during the interview that he met Ronald about 2 years prior and that they were friends, they spent alcohol.
During this time, Ronald made no secret of his interest in Terrence. But Terrence claims for a year he rebuffed the older man's advances.
Mr. Taylor wanted to be more than just friends. TJ Mitchell had told police that he wanted to be just friends.
Then one night, Terrence says, he had a little too much to drink.
He talked about getting drunk and things going to another level.
I was drunk and it was experiencing daily ever since then. And I don't know, he just said like, my energy and the way I act is like he wants me around.
He started talking more about almost being he had a homosexual relationship with Ronald Taylor.
It was also learned during this investigation that among the high school age set within the community, there was a certain stigma attached to being gay.
Terrence was the star football player, an athlete. He had no shortage of female attention. In fact, he had a girlfriend. So he probably preferred to keep this relationship a secret.
But apparently it was a secret that went both ways.
Terrence wasn't just keeping his relationship with Ronald Taylor a secret from his classmates. He was also keeping his relationship with his girlfriend a secret from Ronald.
Terrence says Ronald was overcome with jealous rage. Then he did the unthinkable.
He posted something on Facebook about TJ Mitchell being a, quote, Bloomfield gay football player.
Ronald was essentially using this post or this image or this outing of TJ as a way to keep him in line.
This was online for about 5 hours before it was taken off.
Terrence said Ronald made it very clear if he didn't break up with his girlfriend, they were going to have problems.
He just said he's going to post it on my mom more, my grandmother more. He didn't care.
It became increasingly more erratic. And then just before the murder, it became violent.
Ronald allegedly threatened him. He basically was saying, "You're my boyfriend and there's nothing you can do about it."
It's a shocking story, but could it be a motive for murder?
So after he got out and he started running, what did you do?
I chased him.
In the wee hours of November 22, 2013, the truth about Terrence Mitchell and Ronald Taylor's relationship finally came to light.
We learned that they did have an intimate relationship.
Because Ronald would consistently threaten him with saying, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to out you."
Now inside a Bloomfield, Connecticut police station, Terrence is prepared to tell investigators what really happened in the hours leading up to Ronald's death.
TJ had texted Ronald for them to meet to talk later in person.
Terrence and Ronald had been texting back and forth. Ronald is saying, "Call me when school's about out. I'm ready to listen." And Terrence writes back, "No, we need to talk in person."
Ronald called him and said something to him like, "I'm coming over and it's not gonna..."
His house and texted him to come outside.
Given Ronald's alleged statement that things were not going to, quote, end well, Terrence is afraid that Ronald's going to try to harm him.
Terrence took it upon himself to protect himself and took a steak knife outside with him.
Once inside the car, the conversation quickly turned to Ronald requesting to see TJ's phone.
Hey, what's up, man? Nothing? Who you texting?
When TJ turned his telephone over to Ronald, Ronald saw that the text messages on there, mostly to the women, contained emotions like LOL or a smiley face.
He type of love.
What you mean? You don't never text me like that.
TJ reports that Ronald became increasingly infuriated by the conversation.
No, I kill you. You know that, right? Man, what's wrong with you? Chill out.
He was actually taking his index finger and in the shape of a gun, holding it to him, and he was also like smushing his head.
He's swinging.
Where are you swinging to?
Towards the face.
Okay.
What? Shut up!
Terrence said that Ronald had hit him, and at that point he pulled the knife out of his pocket and he stabbed him.
The passenger door where TJ is sitting is open. Ronald flees from the car by crossing over TJ. TJ reports stabbing Ronald one time as Ronald crosses over him.
So after he got out and he started running, what did you do?
I chased him.
What was he saying?
He was saying, "I take it back, I take it back. I don't need it to me."
Okay, then what happened?
I stabbed him again.
He had actually cut himself with his own knife during the course of stabbing Ronald.
At some point, TJ reports Ronald turned to him with his hands extended, and TJ stabbed him yet again. TJ stabs Ronald one more time in the lower back. Ronald removes that knife, turns to TJ and says, "I'm dying."
At the end of Terrence's statement, tears well up in the frightened teenager's eyes.
It's like I blacked out, but no one stabbed me. I didn't want this to happen like this. I just wanted to go my way.
When detectives ask why Terrence lied in the first place, he becomes even more emotional.
I was scared. I didn't want.
What took place in Ronald's car between Ronald decided he would take that power back for himself. Unfortunately, he took the worst of the roads available.
Terrence's confession gives detectives probable cause to place him under arrest for the murder of Ronald Taylor.
That phone call was the most devastating call that I've ever had in my life. It was like the whole world just came crashing down.
The story of Terrence's double life stuns his family, but what shocks them even more is how this model teenager ended up a killer.
I know my grandson, Terrence, was, in my eyes, a good kid.
While no one in his family believes Terrence's crime was justified, they do think Ronald Taylor preyed on an innocent young boy.
Terrence was 15 years old when he met him. Come into his house, they can drink alcohol, they can smoke marijuana, they get in a compromising position, and now I got you. So when you have your head on straight the next day and you decide, I don't want any part of that, it's too late.
But when Ronald Taylor's family meets with police, they see matters very differently.
It was all Terrence, because he's the one that texted my son to come and meet him.
To them, Terrence Mitchell is nothing more than a cold-blooded killer hiding behind a claim of self-defense.
We feel like it was premeditated because he told Ronald, I need to talk to you. I need to see you in person.
This was all premeditated.
In fact, they say if Terrence was truly terrified of Ronald, why did he leave the safety of his own home to meet him?
Why are you gonna come out with a knife? You thought about it, it's premeditated.
Terrence's portrayal of Ronald City Taylor as a violent and controlling person is dead wrong.
Ronald did have a good heart and is not bad, was not controlling. Ronald wouldn't have just punched him or whatever for no reason. No.
I'm telling you that is bogus bullshit. Those are my words. You can put that on record. All right. City wouldn't harm a fly.
Just 24 hours earlier, Terrence Mitchell was Bloomfield's golden boy. Now a stunned community is trying to make sense of this unfathomable crime.
The story
It shocked the community to find out that a young kid with, all the potential in the world could do something like this.
But before it's all over, more shocking accusations will come to light. Accusations that will keep the community of Bloomfield wondering, will Terrence Mitchell be locked away forever or get away scot-free?
This situation that he got involved in, I was sorry that he had gotten involved in that. Terrence didn't feel that he could pay, which he says he is not. And the embarrassment. And because he felt he was being threatened with being exposed, I'm gonna tell your grandmother, I'm gonna tell your mother. And I wish he had let him tell me, because what he was trying to prevent happened anyway.
On November 22, 2013, stunned residents of Bloomfield, Connecticut wake to the news that 18-year-old star athlete Terrence T.J. Mitchell.
I was rocked by this. Here's a high school kid, very successful football player. He wants to go to college. He has nothing but accolades from his coach and others in the community. And then all of a sudden, this horrendous crime happens.
Even worse, after reviewing Terrence's confession, Ronald's family suspects that he may not have been the only perpetrator.
TJ's story was that after he stabbed Ronald, Ronald climbed across from the driver's side to the passenger side to get out that side. But why would somebody that just got stabbed crawl over to the person that just stabbed him?
The only conclusion Ronald...
Not done alone, and everybody who's guilty should have to pay.
In the end, investigators find no evidence to support the family's claim, but are able to reassure Ronald's family that they have a strong case against Terrence Mitchell.
The state side believed there was enough evidence here to charge TJ with murder.
Terrence's story was that he acted in self-defense and that he only stabbed Ronald after he was punched in the face. But authorities have a problem with that account.
The hallmark of self-defense is that you're defending yourself from the attacks of another person. But after Ronald told him, "No, I take it back," TJ chased him again and stabbed himself from Ronald.
A finding that seems supported by Ronald Taylor's autopsy report.
According to Terrence Mitchell, he attacked Ronald Taylor and stabbed him 5 times during the entire incident. But after the autopsy report came out, it was shown that Ronald Taylor was actually stabbed a total of 13 times and cut 6 times.
Ronald was stabbed 19 times. Do you know how hard it is to stab somebody going through skin, bones, and meat? You know how much energy that takes? 19 times?
But as the shock and the lurid details of the crime begin to...
There were allegations that were made by people, including TJ Mitchell's attorney, who were saying that there was sexual activity going on between him and teenagers, and that he would smoke pot, allegedly, and offer alcohol to these kids to befriend them, and that he was, quote, grooming them to be like a sexual partner.
The defense also points out what they say are disturbing parallels between Terrence Mitchell's case and the other juvenile who stabbed Ronald Taylor.
During the processing of that juvenile, he made what was then a seemingly innocuous statement, something to the effect of, "He threatened me, how can I be the one arrested?"
That kind of made me raise some eyebrows and made me by people younger than him. There was a lot of sympathy for TJ Mitchell. People really felt that he was a victim, despite the horrendous crime that he had committed.
For Ronald Taylor's family, the outpouring of support for a self-professed killer is stunning.
That was like the most painfulest thing, is just to see that he got an outpour of help, but we're the one that don't have our family member anymore.
While public opinion continues to shift, prosecutors face another problem.
One of the defense team's theories was that Terrence acted under the sway of extreme
emotional, so disturbing that caused TJ to lose a part of his sanity and commit this crime. Jury may say, hey, TJ has proved an extreme emotional disturbance just by the nature of being entrapped in his relationship with Ronald. This kid has suffered enough. Let's go ahead and throw out the law and let him go.
Fearing Terrence could walk, the DA's office sits down with Ronald Taylor's family.
The prosecutor had said that he wasn't sure if he could actually get a murder conviction.
Because of his age and some of the technicalities of the case.
The proposed deal would reduce the charge from murder to manslaughter and require Terrence Mitchell to serve 12 years in prison.
The family was opposed. We didn't want to do it because no matter what, you took something that was very dear to us.
But prosecutors urged the family to reconsider.
They was saying that basically the way it looked because of his age and the control and this, that, and the other, that he could get off and do no time. And we didn't want to risk that happening at all. To go through all that and take a chance of him getting nothing, we chose to get something.
On October 7th,
just figured for the charge, for the crime, for what the situation was, taking the plea was the best deal to do.
3 months later, a Connecticut judge sentences Terrence to 12 years in prison.
It was a combination of sadness because he was going to jail for a very serious crime, knowing what that's going to do to him for the rest of his life. But we were also bittersweet.
TJ's a good kid who made a horrible decision.
It's a crime that's left 2 good families devastated. One that ended a man's life and ruined the future of another.
I think the whole case is absolutely tragic. You have a family who has lost a loved one. Ronald Taylor is never coming back, and his family's got to deal with that. Then you have Terrence Mitchell's family. You have a young man who had all the potential in the world, who was looking at scholarships and an amazing football player, and now he's incarcerated. It's a terrible thing to happen to a family. It's a terrible thing to happen to a community. And I just pray it doesn't happen to anyone else.
Hospitality, and just always having a great time, very friendly.
Down on Madeline Street, Lafayette resident Demetria Robinson is heading home after her shift.
It was a normal November day. I had just gotten off of work.
Demetria crosses the street to her house, and shortly after she gets home, she hears a commotion outside of the community daycare facility across the street.
I was standing outside, and I just hear noise, and I just seen this car, and this woman, she was blowing her horn. And I was like, what's going on?
All of a sudden, you see two adults fighting. There's a woman literally trying to help her and her child.
Leave her alone! He's on top of her, and the baby is under her.
Mind your business.
And her eyes just looking at me saying help. But in that same instant, you look at the baby, he's crying, looking at me. It was just a crazy situation.
In that split second, Demetria makes a fateful decision.
I said a little prayer to myself. I said, God, just help me to get the baby. If you want me to get the baby, just help me. In some kind of way, I was just able to just get the baby. And I made sure the baby was okay. And I took him into safety.
The man took the woman and drove off, holding onto the steering wheel and her by the fuse.
Within minutes, Lafayette dispatchers are flooded with 911 calls.
There's a man beating a woman over here.
Police race to the scene of the attack and are immediately thrust into an unbelievable manhunt where every last second counts and where one young mother's life hangs in the balance between life and death.
In southern Louisiana, no one will ever forget the name Bethany Arsenault.
Born in 1983, Bethany Arsenault was raised in Duson, Louisiana, a small farming community on the outskirts of Lafayette.
In the area, everybody knows everybody.
The Arsenault clan was no different, and Bethany grew up surrounded by a large extended family.
She had this big, tight-knit family. There were always lots of cousins and friends around, cookouts, family dinners, and they genuinely loved and supported one another.
By the time Bethany entered high school, she had grown into a beautiful young woman with electric eyes and a magnetic personality.
Bethany was really a strikingly beautiful young lady. She was 5'8", had these glowing eyes, and just exuded an alluring, attractive energy.
Like a lot of young women her age, after high school, Bethany dated a few guys, but true love remained elusive.
During her early 20s, she worked and had a couple of boyfriends, but for whatever reason, those relationships didn't work out.
She came from a great family. She wanted a family of her own someday, but of course, it's not always easy to find Mr. Right, especially in a small town.
But then in 2010, at the age of 26,
Hey, Bethany.
Bethany ran into an old family friend.
My friend Scott, right?
Yes.
Scott Thomas.
Scott and Bethany had met a few years earlier. He was friends with her.
Time no see.
Like Bethany, he was 26, hardworking, and came from a good family in nearby Leonville, Louisiana. Scott was charming, funny, and sweet. And best of all, he was single like her.
So when are you gonna hang out?
We're hanging out right now.
I was talking one-on-one time.
Soon.
I hope it's sooner than later.
Given Scott's history with her family, there was a real comfort level between them. Bethany felt like she could trust him, that he was a good guy, and when they went out together, they just clicked.
Their connection was just electric and immediate, and
They were both young, good-looking, and fun. They spent a lot of time together.
Within a few months, Scott and Bethany moved into a home together in Leonville, Louisiana, about 30 miles from Bethany's family.
This is what Scott wanted. He wanted them to live together. He wanted them to build a family together.
A wish that came true in 2011 when their son Jackson was born.
Scott and Bethany had a beautiful little boy. And like any couple with a new baby, at that time, they were very, very happy together.
But as much as Scott and Bethany adored their son,
but he could be a little emotionally up and down, a little suffocating, and on top of all that, Bethany was used to being closer to her family and was feeling a little disconnected.
Ultimately, in June of 2013, they both decided it would be best if they went their separate ways. Scott stayed in Leonville, and Bethany went back to Tucson to be closer to her family.
They shared custody. Bethany had primary custody, but Scott was definitely in the picture.
Bethany was working with him. You know, he was seeing his son. She just didn't want it to be involved with him on an intimate level.
Honestly, it seemed like they were back to being good friends, family friends, who just so happened to have a beautiful young...
Back on even keel, a shocking chain of events ripped their lives apart. It begins that fateful November day in 2013.
Here is this beautiful young mother attacked and abducted in broad daylight.
It was just a crazy situation.
A situation that would leave a community holding its breath and wondering what kind of monster might be lurking in their midst.
This was the third abduction in a year in the community, and there was a real fear that the same person was responsible.
Newly single mother Bethany Arsenault was ready and willing to take on the world.
She was a beautiful 29-year-old woman. She had an adorable son, and she had her whole life in front of her.
But just as life was looking up, an unspeakable horror rips Bethany's life apart.
On November 6, 2013, Bethany was violently abducted outside a daycare center in Lafayette, Louisiana.
Everybody was really shocked to believe that's happening.
There was a lot of confusion as to just what was going on, whether it was a kidnapping, a carjacking. All that was known was that a male rescued.
As responding officers try to ascertain the situation, eyewitnesses describe a chaotic and violent scene.
What did you see step by step? I saw her get out the car with her son, and then he started pushing her into his car.
They said that there was an African-American male between 5'10", 6 feet tall. He grabbed the woman, threw her in the vehicle. It was a white Buick LeSabre.
It happened like so fast. I don't even remember seeing his face. The only thing that really sticks in my head is that girl eyes.
The police put out a statewide APB on the vehicle, but they only had a vague description of this man.
Trace it back to Bethany Arsenault.
People don't know if these two know each other. Is this just a random guy? Is he someone who escaped from prison? Or is he a rapist?
So many things could have been going through their heads. You never know what could have happened to that woman, or to Bethany.
But as questions about Bethany's abduction begin to swirl, investigators are forced to face a sad new fact about life in Lafayette.
Lafayette is a pretty safe town. Like everywhere, it's got its good areas and its bad areas. But in the last few years, there have been some very upsetting crimes involving young women.
Mickey Shunick, a young woman riding her bicycle one night, she was found in a shallow grave out in the middle of nowhere.
The Mickey Shunick case was a case that resonated with a lot of people. So when you hear the word kidnapping, everybody's immediately on guard, and they're thinking, what's the information that we need to know? What do we need to be on the lookout for?
But Mickey Shunick wasn't the only young woman to vanish from the area. 16-year-old Keosha Felix also went missing in April of 2012. And Keosha's case has even more parallels with Bethany's.
Like Bethany, Keosha was from Tucson, Louisiana.
She was also mother of a 1-year-old. She vanished into thin air. The majority believe
Felix is something that the community as a whole is still asking.
Consequently, authorities fear Bethany's abduction may not be an isolated incident.
This could be part of a pattern. It could be the work of a serial kidnapper, or even worse, a serial killer.
So in this instance, police have information about other missing persons cases in the area. They have details about these cases that the family members don't have that may be relevant to this case. And they have to seriously consider, are these crimes related?
I think that's when everybody was alarmed that it really was a scary situation.
As the search for Bethany intensifies,
Oh, here's a missing person. Here's a family that needs help. Let's get them the help they need.
It just made you wonder what was going on. And after I found out there was a little boy involved, it was just a sense of having a little boy of my own. What's gonna happen to him now? Is his mom gonna be found? What's gonna happen? And then that's when it takes on a different aspect.
as fear spreads through the community, detectives reach out to the Arsenault family to inform them that Bethany has been abducted.
Their loved one was missing and they had no earthly idea where she was.
When you have a very close member of your family that's in...
They were going to do everything in their power to find her, one way or the other.
In a community where blood is thicker than water, there's hope that Bethany's family will be able to find her. But with a trio of young women now missing, would their efforts be too little, too late?
I just thought in my mind that she was dead.
29-year-old Louisiana mom Bethany Arsenault hasn't been seen in the past couple of hours since an unknown assailant forced her into his car outside a daycare in Lafayette, Louisiana, beginning to fear the worst.
Everyone's extremely worried about Bethany. This is a very public kidnapping, a very violent event, and no one knows where Bethany is, who did it, or even if she's still alive.
If it is a kidnapping, there are two people involved. There's the kidnapper and then there's the victim. The sooner you can find out what's going on, the sooner you can close in that circle.
With the clock ticking, Bethany's family hits the streets in search of their missing loved one.
She came from a large, loving family. I mean, you know, the number of people out there searching for her, you know, not giving up hope. They knew that also she was a fighter and wouldn't give up.
Have you seen her?
No, I haven't. I know y'all from around here, though. Such a good family. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help.
Thanks.
It was a large-scale effort. You did have Lafayette Police, and you also had the Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Office searching for her. And then the family was really doing a full-scale search. The family is doing everything that they can. You know, we've had it in the paper. It's been on television. The police have put out alerts. So it's a community effort.
While Bethany's family goes door to door, investigators are still looking into the possibility that her case could be connected to the disappearances of Mickey Schuneck.
Up and disappeared. So is it possible that the same person could be responsible for all three crimes?
But when investigators search for similarities between Bethany's disappearance and that of Mickey Schuneck, they quickly hit a dead end.
Right away, they can eliminate any connection between Bethany's case and that of 21-year-old Mickey Schuneck because a registered sex offender had been arrested and charged with Mickey's death. And at the time of Bethany's disappearance, he was behind bars.
However, Kiosha Felix's case isn't so cut and dry.
The answer as to where is Kiosha Felix is something that we in the journalistic community...
Law enforcement probably wouldn't want to call it a cold case because I'm sure they're doing everything that they can, but the dozens of times that I checked up with law enforcement about it, there have been no leads.
While it's possible the individual who kidnapped Kiosha also abducted Bethany, there are some glaring differences between the perp's MO in each case.
Kiosha basically vanished into thin air. No one had seen her alleged kidnapping. It was the opposite of Bethany's abduction.
This was brazen in every sense of the word, not only because of the time of day, but with certain kidnappings, things are planned out. There is, or someone had enough.
But just who in Lafayette would want to abduct and perhaps kill Bethany Arsenault?
People don't know if these two know each other. Are they friends? Are they lovers? Is this just a random guy and they're trying to figure out what to do?
Before investigators have time to zero in on a suspect, officers stumble upon a huge discovery.
It looks like that white car they were looking for earlier.
On the night of November 6th, just 9 miles from the scene of Bethany's kidnapping, Police found an abandoned white Buick LeSabre behind an oil production facility in Tucson.
Immediately search the area and find a woman's shirt on the ground and find additional clothing and blood in the vehicle.
I've got a footprint.
When authorities arrived, they saw 2 sets of footprints heading into the fields.
Somebody's barefoot and they're heading into the sugarcane.
But tracking the prints at night through towering sugarcane fields is no easy task.
That area, you're looking sugarcane probably 5.5, 6 foot tall. I mean, growing up as kids, we used to go play in it, treat it like a maze. It's very easy to run inside sugarcane and get lost.
We're not able to find any leads, and it probably had something to do with the weather conditions.
Because sunspots were still wet. Those fields hold water. But as far as to find footprints inside there, it's pretty rare.
Even though the footprints don't pan out, officers have better luck with the abandoned vehicle.
When police ran the plates on the Buick, they found that it belonged to Bethany's ex-boyfriend, Scott Thomas.
But could the doting father of Bethany's young son truly be behind her shocking abduction? If so, just what had pushed him over the brink? As investigators press for answers, and
volunteers are out searching tirelessly for Bethany. Then all of a sudden, the sister gets a phone call, and it's Bethany.
Police in Lafayette, Louisiana have just made a disturbing discovery in the search for beautiful mother Bethany Arsenault, who has been missing for 3 hours.
Law enforcement found Bethany's ex-boyfriend Scott Thomas's car abandoned in a rural part of Tucson, Louisiana. The vehicle had women's clothing and blood in it.
When the authorities did find the car, they did see some footprints. They kind of followed where that won't have any clues as to where they ended up.
While authorities intensify their manhunt, investigators try to determine what may have sparked this violent abduction. As detectives speak to Bethany's family, they uncover a troubling truth.
Bethany was in a relationship with Scott, and it was a violent relationship.
To friends, co-workers, and the larger Lafayette community, this revelation comes as a shock.
From the outside looking in, they looked like friends. Ex-boyfriend and girlfriend, but friends who cared about the well-being of the child they had together.
Bethany...
That he actually moved in with Bethany because she had received threats from Thomas in the past. So obviously there was some tension there.
Like his mood swings would be like quick, fast, in a hurry.
It seems like he wasn't a bad guy. I don't think that anyone thought that he would take it to the extremes that he did.
Bethany's brother Victor also describes Scott's jealous tendencies to detectives.
Like, that's just how he was. Like, he was so, like, he was just insecure, I guess. Like, you know, like, it's just crazy.
Just calm down.
You think I'm stupid?
Scott, you know what? I can't even talk about this.
Nah, you ain't going nowhere.
Scott!
He's becoming more possessive. He was monitoring her every move, and when she wasn't there or where she would normally be, he would be there. He's definitely out to cause her harm.
Said you ain't going nowhere. You hear me?
He was very abusive and, you know, struck her, threatened to kill her and her child, drug her by her hair. He was, you know, known to have a pattern of violence.
And how long did this go on?
For more than 2 years, family members say Bethany kept the abuse a secret, but eventually...
Couldn't do things she used to do, but I started catching on to it after I started hearing a little bit of things, you know?
There's a lot of shame and embarrassment for victims of domestic violence. A lot of times the victim of the abuse is being told that it's their fault they're being abused, and they start to believe it. It's a very shameful feeling for them, and it's not uncommon for them to keep it from their loved ones.
There was a lot of abuse, and she would leave, come back, leave and come back. And she finally had enough in June, and she reported him to authorities because he threatened to kill her.
Fearing for her safety and that of their young child, Bethany moved out of the Leonville house and followed.
Bethany moved in with her mother, but she had to return to Scott's house to retrieve some things. When she did, Scott made a scene. Law enforcement was called and Scott was arrested.
He was like, Bethany, I'm gonna get you here. I'm gonna get you here.
After his arrest, Scott was apologetic, and he made it clear to Bethany that he intended to change his life for the better, and he hoped that Bethany would allow him back in her life.
We know that she was in a relationship that had involved domestic violence. She made a report to authorities. However, the person that she made the report against was the father of her child. She would leave, come back.
That was a bitter pill for Scott to swallow.
He wouldn't tell me exactly, you know, I'm a kill myself, but he would always like, you know, I can't live like this. He just had in his mind, like if he couldn't be with Bethany, nobody could be with Bethany.
For detectives, it's now clear Scott Thomas is their man. But if Bethany is Scott's captive, they know there may not be much time to save her.
No one even knows that Bethany is still alive. This guy sounds suicidal, and it's quite possible he's planning to kill Bethany and himself.
Several hours into the search, when it seems the stakes...
Hello? Oh my God, Bethany.
Listen, I need you to take care of my son. Please tell me that you'll take care of my son.
What? Where are you? Where are you?
Just promise me.
Bethany, where are you? Bethany.
While it's reassuring to know Bethany is still alive, the sense of relief is fleeting.
The sister doesn't know where her sister's calling from, what's going on, but those words, take care of my son, kind of implies like, hey, this is it. It's your responsibility because I'm not going to be here anymore.
Equally shocking development takes the case in an even more unbelievable direction.
One of the younger cousins went to see the psychic.
She said, don't go too far. Bethany is still in the area.
For nearly 24 hours, Bethany Arsenault has been missing in southern Louisiana. A surprise phone call has just revealed that Bethany is still alive, but for how long, no one knows.
Bethany was with Scott, and it was a violent relationship. He threatened to kill her, and based on his actions, he definitely intended to do so.
Their already intensive search.
They rallied together, and maybe 100 of them were out there searching, you know, on foot, on four-wheelers, combing almost the entire city, almost the entire Lafayette Parish.
The tension was very thick. They were just so upset by her disappearance.
By the morning of November 8th, exhausted friends, family, and authorities are beginning to wonder if Scott Thomas hasn't already fled Lafayette Parish, having either dragged Bethany with him or left her for dead in the Louisiana bayou.
Authorities, once they found the footsteps, they used multiple things. They used...
But just as their hopes are fading, Bethany's family receives a tip from a most unusual source.
One of the younger cousins went to see the psychic, and the reading said that she was in the general area where the car was.
The woman told them to look by a body of water.
Heeding the psychic's advice, Bethany's family, including Victor and Marcus Arsenault, hightail it back towards the location where Scott's car was found 2 days before. There, they encounter a local resident named Kenneth Alleman.
Howdy. What can I do for you, sir?
Hey, we're looking for my niece, and we spoke to a psychic, and she said that she was not too far from...
They said one of her family members believes in psychics real good, and she told him that she was still alive and she was near a body of water. And when he said body of water, the first thing that came into my mind, they have a pond, which was about maybe 400 yards from there, which we called Anderson Pond. So we figured that would be the next place that we needed to go.
It's a little ways that way. I can show you if you'd like.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right, well, let's go.
But on their way to the pond, the men run into a local farmer.
Where y'all headed? Anderson Pond. We're looking for that missing girl.
Ow! Houses on this road, but we didn't find nothing, and that's when he pointed to the house in the middle of the field and asked them if they had searched there. And they said, no. They said, we didn't even know there was a house there.
At first glance, you'd never think that there was a home there. You know, it looks like a bunch of trees, bushes, overgrown grass.
I guess we'll check that first.
It was kind of a weird feeling, almost like something you only see in the movies. We got there and everybody just kind of stopped and looked at each other and like, what are we supposed to do now? What happens now?
Hey, check out the back.
He was going towards the back of the house.
Hearing Bethany's cries for help, her cousin Marcus takes action.
Marcus breaks it open, and at that point, he could hear Bethany scream.
Bethany! Bethany, is he on? Where are you? Bethany!
He had a knife to her throat and he started, stabbing her, in essence, in the throat and in the head.
Scott, stop! Scott, stop!
And at that point, he opened fire.
Marcus!
When she started screaming, everybody scattering at the same time, everybody calling for the police. None of us knew what was going on. Nobody knew what was going on inside that house.
In the morning hours of November 8th, 2013, the search for 29-year-old single mother Bethany Arsenault has come to a head as a hail of gunfire erupts from inside an abandoned farmhouse just outside her hometown of Tucson, Louisiana.
When we heard the shots, we didn't know where the shooting was coming from. We just know that one of the guys ran towards the back of the house. So we didn't know what was going on.
Though it seems like an eternity, seconds after the shooting stops, a figure emerges from the home.
I noticed her cousin come around the corner with her, and everybody just, once we saw that, we just all kind of took a deep breath in. It was bloody. I mean, she had blood coming from her head and her neck and everything. We saw the knife wounds to her neck, we saw the knife wounds in her head, and we knew she needed to get to the hospital quick.
But as serious as Bethany's wounds appear, when first responders arrived, they quickly ascertained that her injuries are not life-threatening, and fortunately, she's going to survive.
With Bethany now en route to a hospital, a team of officers cautiously enters the abandoned farmhouse.
Clear right.
Officers don't know if Scott Thomas is truly dead or if he's still alive, armed, and dangerous.
Moments later, they find his lifeless body in a bedroom.
Body left. Tango 7, starting major crimes and no detective, please.
The scene is nothing short of pure carnage.
There's blood everywhere. There are bullet casings everywhere. It looks like the shootout at the OK Corral.
No pulse.
Bethany's cousin, Marcus Arsenault, had in fact shot Scott Thomas 11 times.
Him little choice.
They kicked down the door, went into the bedroom, and there Scott was on top of Bethany, stabbing her.
He tussling, which somehow, she's like, he's stabbing me, Mark, he killing me, help, he stabbed me in my head, he stabbed me.
When the first shot hit him, he kept stabbing her.
I shot him in the leg, I shot, and I hit him in the ribs. I hit him in the ribs. That's when he dropped the knife.
He had to strike him 11 times before Bethany was able to free herself from his grip. That's how strong and possessive he was. He was being shot numerous times, but he was intent
to be alive doesn't become clear until 11 days later, when she's able to speak with detectives. According to Bethany, it all began on the afternoon of November 6th, 2013.
So although she had a restraining order against him, she did have shared custody. This was a prearranged meeting, and as they would do whenever it was her time to pick up her son, they would meet in a neutral location.
Apparently, as this exchange is occurring, he made some sort of advance towards Bethany.
He was trying to talk to me and trying to hug me, and I was like, no, Scott, I'm leaving. He just went crazy. And I know how Scott do, and he was mad or whatever. So I seen him and that was daycare.
So Scott chases Bethany to the daycare. He's yelling, he's screaming, and he throws Bethany in the car just after a Good Samaritan is able to grab her son and takes off.
Scott was able to snatch Bethany and throw her into his vehicle and drive off, holding onto his steering wheel and then grabbing Bethany's hair so she could not break free.
He was just mad. You see what you made me do? You see what you made me do?
Bethany says Scott then marched her through the adjacent sugarcane fields.
They hid out in the ditch while the family, our police officers, roamed right sound.
He basically drug her through the woods that first night of the kidnapping, and then eventually he drug her to this house.
Bethany's time in that home was like a living hell. It was worse than prison. He watched her every move.
There was a lone mattress in the corner of a room, very little sunlight, and I believe a jug of water may have been left behind for some years, I'm sure.
The first night she was forced to sleep on the floor under a dirty carpet while he had a knife to her throat.
I couldn't move. I couldn't do nothing because he was threatening to kill me. And he kept saying he had a gun. He had a gun.
He's without any food or water. You know, torture.
But Bethany says that even in her weakened state, she continued to fight for her life.
The first day there, she was trying to go into the restroom and she was like, you know what, I'm not gonna let this guy just, hold me here. So she got a curtain rod and tried to hit him upside the head. And, it just bounced off. Her second day, she was using the restroom and she took a piece of wood and tried to break free by knocking out the window, but we caught her.
To make matters worse, Bethany says that with each passing hour, Scott was growing more and more unstable.
He would cry and he kept saying he was gonna kill me and then he was gonna kill himself.
His emotions and mood varied. And even at one point, Bethany said he became paranoid. And she said that she sensed that he kind of regretted that it got that far, but it was too late for him to turn back. Throughout the whole ordeal, he made it known that his main intention was to kill her, but they were going to die together.
Then, on the morning of November 8th, a glimmer of hope appeared.
They woke up, they both heard the ATVs, and he was like, oh, it's your family, they're coming for you. And he put her on the bed and he held a knife to her.
Last chance to survive this ordeal, and she just starts screaming.
All I felt was him like trying to slice my neck. So I kept hollering, help, help. He killing me, help, help.
Moments later, it was all over.
So Marcus kept saying, let her go, Scott, let her go. And he kept trying to slice my neck. And I kept hollering, no, Marcus, help me. He trying to kill me. He trying to kill me. Please help me. And Scott didn't say nothing. Lamar fired the gun.
Everything had to have fought. This happened. The family and the community came together and they fought to get her back. She came out bloodied. She came out scarred, but she came out of it.
Following Bethany's statement, on April 23, 2014, a Louisiana grand jury formally clears her cousin Marcus of any wrongdoing in the shooting death of Scott Thomas.
Everyone thought that Marcus did the right thing. Law enforcement did end up saying that it was a justifiable homicide. And I believe had they not, it would have been public outrage.
And though Bethany and her family are still reeling from the terrible afterworse,
it was just courageous and brave effort by the entire family.
I believe that everyone thought that Marcus did the right thing. The fact that she made it out of this and, was saved by her family, reunited with her son, it's just the ultimate story of survival.
Scott was hoping that he would die with Bethany. Throughout the whole ordeal, he made it known that his main intention was they were going to die together. It definitely was a case of, if I can't have you, no one will.
It wasn't exactly a sigh of relief. They were ecstatic to have Bethany out of harm's way, but they were also apologetic for the
twosome got out alive. And that isn't an officer carrying her. And that says a lot. You know, the officers were there, but in that image, that's a community and that's a family literally holding each other up.
I hadn't talked to him today, but last I heard, he said he was coming.
Chief has been picking up his son and bring him to the barbecue too. And he never did show up.
That kind of alarmed the family that he didn't pick his son up because there are certain things Tony would not do, and not picking up his son was one of them. He loved his son very much.
Over the next few hours, Tony's family continues to try to track him down.
Did he answer?
Every time I call, I just get the voicemail. I'm telling you, something's not right. It's not right.
My grandma was start calling everybody that she knew that knew Tony and see could they get in touch with him.
No one knew where Tony was.
But will have many wondering just who in this story was on the wrong side of the law.
We was just saying, why? How could something happen like this? Everything was just crazy.
Tony Hayes was born in 1969 in the new Chicago neighborhood of Memphis, Tennessee.
It was a low-income neighborhood, but there was a sense of pride in the community. Even though it was low-income, my parents instilled values in us.
Values that the whole Hayes family took to heart.
The Hayes family was a very loving, caring family. Mother Hayes, she did not play with her children. They knew that she was their friend, but she was also the law in that household.
He's a very disciplined person.
After high school, Tony went off to the Marine Corps. He served his country during the Persian Gulf War, and I think maybe saw himself becoming a law enforcement officer.
A dream that came true after Tony left the Marine Corps and returned home to Memphis.
When Tony became a Memphis police officer, that was a sense of pride and accomplishment for him.
For the next 9 years, Tony worked some of the most dangerous beats in the city.
Tony was an undercover cop. He do his job to the fullest, and he was a hard worker.
He ultimately arose to the rank of sergeant and was proud of that accomplishment, as was his family.
But Tony's success in life with the ladies.
Good evening, ladies. How you doing?
He was about 6'1" in height and very athletically built. And it was all muscle, and it wasn't no fat. He wore nice clothes, and he was a car enthusiast, so, you know, he loved cars. He always had a nice car and kept himself up, so like I said, the ladies probably found Tony very attractive.
Like his prized cars, Tony had a soft spot for beautiful women. And over the next few years, he married twice.
He met his first wife after he got out of the military. She was drop-dead gorgeous, as was his second wife.
Though both marriages ended in divorce, there was a silver lining.
Even though the breakups were hard,
Tony's mini-me.
He was an excellent father, spent a lot of time with his son, and really provided a great role model for that young man.
Though Tony was a loving father, he longed to have a woman in his life to help him raise young Devin. And in the spring of 2005, Tony met the drop-dead gorgeous 36-year-old Monique Johnson.
Tony Hayes met Monique Johnson while he was moonlighting as a security guard at the apartment complex where she lived.
I'm Tony.
It's really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, beautiful.
Monique would be what a lot of people considered very attractive. She described herself as light-skinned with long...
...was mutual.
Dinner sometime?
Yeah, sure.
He was sort of this kind of charming guy, so they started dating, and I think she fell pretty hard for Tony. He would take her out to eat. They were spending every day together. He would send her flowers.
But as the couple ignited their romance, it didn't take Tony long to realize that Monique may be more than just a passing fling.
There's no doubt Monique and Tony had a lot in common.
Monique Johnson was a native of the region, had a hard upbringing, but managed to bring herself up by her own bootstraps. She was married and divorced, had 2 children, worked as a deputy jailer for the Shelby County Sheriff's Department.
Having so much in common only heightened the couple's attraction to one another. But it was in the bedroom where the sparks really flew.
It became incredibly passionate, and it moved very quickly.
It was passionate, hot, and it seemed perfect. They were planning a future.
Though both Tony and Monique had tried and failed at marriage before, by the spring of 2006, the couple was talking engagement rings and wedding vows.
Tony was telling Monique, hey, one day we're going to get married and have this family.
They both believed that a part that had been missing in their lives had been completed.
2006 is even more concerning.
We want to know, why would he do this? Why he want to answer his phone, and why he want to call nobody and tell somebody where he at?
The following morning, Tony is absent from roll call at the Memphis Police's Union Station precinct, which makes his fellow officers extremely worried.
Has anybody seen Hayes?
By all accounts, Tony was a model officer, and when he failed to show up for a shift, alarm bells started to go off.
The police, to say the least, were taking Tony's disappearance very seriously.
But just what had happened to Officer Tony Hayes?
Going to be very aggressive about it. We knew that it was going to be passionate for them as it was for us to seek what they thought was justice.
After a blissful year together, Deputy Jailer Monique Johnson and Police Officer Tony Hayes were already talking marriage.
Tony and Monique fell in love hard, and it was fast.
They appeared to be happy and a good match.
But now, honest colleagues at the Memphis Police Department are growing increasingly concerned.
The last time that his family had seen or spoken to Tony was on the afternoon of September the 3rd. He was supposed to come to a family picnic the next day, but he failed to show up.
Tony goes missing, and it does become a big deal quickly. Because of Tony's occupation, both as a police officer and the fact that he worked in security at the apartment complex, gave him exposure to a lot of volatile situations.
While Tony was missing, there were several scenarios discussed within the police department amongst his friends and family. Did someone put out a hit on Tony? Was it the result of some sort of investigation in which he was involved?
Good.
While detectives comb through Tony's arrest records in search of a lead, a team of officers execute a search of his home.
There's no evidence of foul play, but a search of his residence revealed his Lexus is missing from the garage.
Car's gone. Police were looking for those plates in that car.
By that afternoon, Tony's disappearance is the talk of the town.
Missing persons reports typically get some media coverage depending on who is missing. But when a Memphis police officer, a person in charge of protecting the community, is now missing, it certainly got our attention and was quickly on the TV news, radio news, even in the newspaper.
I tried to be optimistic, but after a day had went by and he hadn't called his mom, he hadn't checked in on his son, it became very evident that something was wrong.
No one seems more concerned about Tony's disappearance than his beloved girlfriend, Monique Johnson.
She was expressing her worry over Tony because she had called him several times and kept getting his machine. And so she said it was very unusual because if he wouldn't call back, he would text back.
But Monique's other pressing concern is the well-being of Tony's 11-year-old son, Devin.
She decided she'd check on the son. And so she got a French fry.
I wish I knew where my dad was.
Me too.
Later that evening, investigators get their first chance to speak to Monique Johnson at her home in a brand new suburban development.
When was the last time that you actually saw Tony?
Well, that would have had to have been the morning of Monday, September 4th.
She said that they went to the casinos and they stayed down there that night and that they came back and that he was going to pick up the son.
Was that the last time you heard from him?
Yes, and I went to the movies that night. When I got out, I heard that Tony had been missing.
Have you ever had any kind of problems in your relationship
No,
with Tony?
not at all. I love him so much. And I really just hope that you...
She was extremely worried about Tony's whereabouts, and she was hoping that everything would turn out okay.
They checked her story out, and she had gone out to see a movie the night of Tony's disappearance.
But before detectives leave that evening, they ask Monique one last question.
One angle we're still pursuing is that his disappearance was work-related. So had he mentioned anything to you about work lately? Any issues?
Actually, there is.
Look, I ain't got time to be standing out here all night. Come on, open the door, stop playing.
She remembers something happening at the apartments where he had to pull a gun on a guy and the guy threatened him.
Yo, I need you to calm down now. Leave the premises now, sir.
fear that something could have happened there.
He was essentially off duty and alone and far more susceptible.
While detectives dispatch a team to investigate Monique's allegations, they return to their station for a scheduled meeting with some of Tony's closest colleagues.
They thought Tony's co-workers might know something about problems with former perps.
But what Tony's co-workers are about to reveal will stun detectives, leaving them to wonder if this top cop had actually been living a double life.
This isn't the kind of thing you'd expect to turn up, and detectives realized it was going to be a game changer.
Memphis police officer Tony Hayes seemed to have it all. A great career, a beautiful son, and a stunning girlfriend who set his heart aflame. But now Tony has disappeared without a trace, and detectives fear that he may have been targeted by a violent criminal with an axe to grind.
Police put themselves out there every day. Just going to work, it's possible they could be shot just for wearing the uniform.
Monique told police that Tony had recently been threatened by a guy at the apartment complex where Tony moonlighted.
But while searching for the mystery man who threatened Tony, detectives are also questioning Tony's colleagues at the Memphis Police Department.
Anything could have happened to him, but his personal life is pretty complicated too.
What do you mean exactly?
That's when Tony's colleagues informed detectives that technically, Tony never officially divorced his ex-wife, Kayla Hayes.
During the investigation, Memphis PD discovers that Tony Hayes is married.
Tony's colleagues don't know, however, if Tony's wife knew about Monique or if Monique knew about Tony's wife.
At this point, detectives can't help but wonder, could Tony have been murdered by his own wife?
Thank you very much.
To answer that question, they decide to speak to Tony's wife, their counterparts at the Vegas PD. A local detective heads to Kayla's home.
Ms. Hayes? I'm with the Las Vegas Police Department. Do you mind if I come in and speak with you for a moment?
Is this about Tony?
Yes, it is.
Come on.
Kayla explains that a couple of days earlier, she had received word from Tony's family that he had gone missing.
When was the last time you spoke with Tony?
Honestly, it had been a while.
Kayla explains that they had been separated for about a year and 4 months. In fact, they had only been married for about 3 months before that.
We lived together in Memphis, but it was clear really early.
Tony had a wandering eye.
His one vice was probably that he liked women a little too well. He was what could be called a player.
Were you aware he was seeing a woman named Monique Johnson?
Oh yeah, unfortunately, we had spoken.
His wife was calling to talk to Tony. And since Monique had Tony's phone, she answered. And the wife's going, "Who are you?" And Monique's going, "Who are you?" She goes, "Well, I'm his wife." Well, that didn't sit well with Monique.
And how did you feel that he was seeing another woman?
Look, I have my life and
Vegas, September 4th. And when they checked the car and flight records, her story checked out.
While Tony's wife Kayla seems innocent of any wrongdoing, her statement prompts detectives in Memphis to pay another visit to Tony's girlfriend, Monique Johnson.
They go back to Monique and they confront her about what they know at this point.
Monique doesn't deny any of it. She admits that she was furious when she found out that Tony was married.
When were you going to tell me?
Babe, listen to me.
No. When were you going to tell me? When were you going to tell me that you were married?
I'm sorry, I just didn't know how to tell you. It was over months before we met each other. Monique, it's just me and you.
A courting had any other problem.
Detectives aren't sure what to make of Monique's story. But with no sign of Tony and no evidence of foul play, there's little else they can do.
They had a feeling Monique wasn't telling the whole story, but a feeling isn't grounds for an arrest.
While Monique remains adamant she has no idea what happened to Tony, investigators wonder if Tony's phone records might shed more light on his disappearance.
They pulled Tony's phone records and see he had gotten a text from a woman at 7 a.m. But this woman wasn't Monique Johnson.
Her name was Kim Chapman. So of course, the next question from police is, who is this woman?
Station for an interview. When Kim arrives, she makes quite the impression.
She was very different from Monique. She was a professional woman. She was about 6 feet tall. She had a large frame.
Detectives want to know what her connection is to Tony Hayes. And she says they've been casually dating for the past few months.
The reason we called you in is because we've obtained phone records indicating you had contact with Tony on the date of his disappearance.
Yeah, I texted him because I wanted to go jogging. I was seeing if he was able to come with me.
According to Kim, she got a call back from Tony's phone a short time later. But the voice on the other end of the line wasn't what she expected.
What Kim and illuminate just how sordid and potentially deadly his love life had become.
I think he was a fun-loving guy, a good guy, but someone who played the field too much. He just played with the wrong one.
For more than 48 hours, police in Memphis, Tennessee have been desperately trying to track down their missing colleague, Tony Hayes. The search for Tony has led investigators to a trio of beautiful young women, including Tony's wife, Kayla, his girlfriend, Monique Johnson.
Chapman admitted she and Tony were seeing each other and that she had texted him to go jogging the day he went missing. Investigators want to know if she had anything to do with his disappearance.
The last contact that you had with Tony was that text?
Well, I got a call back from someone else. I don't know who she is. Her name was Monique.
Hello?
Kim says she answered the phone expecting it to be Tony, but instead, somebody else was on the line. Monique Johnson.
Monique says, "What are you doing getting together with Tony?" And Kim's going, "Whoa, who are you and why?"
Tony's girlfriend. Well, he's been with me all weekend. Did you know about me?
Kim claims the call dropped moments later, but not before she heard another voice in the background.
Tony!
Kim says she heard Tony's voice, and he was angry. And Monique was just giving it right back to him.
Monique Johnson had previously told police she had no reason to harm Tony. But if Kim Chapman's statement is true, detectives have proof that Monique and Tony got in a heated argument just hours before he disappeared.
The detectives don't think this is a coincidence.
That evening,
I'm going to give you one last chance to be honest with us and tell us what really happened to Tony Hayes.
I don't know.
Ms. Johnson, we talked to Kim Chapman. She told us that the day that Tony disappeared, you and him got into a scuffle.
Monique knows she's in a really bad place. So she says, okay, I'll talk.
Monique says that after she confronted Tony about his marriage to Kayla Hayes, he assured her there were no other women in his life. But over time, Monique began to doubt that he was truly faithful to her.
There were some flags. It would be unexplained absences or a refusal to really acknowledge where he'd been or what he'd been doing. He became very adamant about it not happening or angry that she didn't trust him, and she was very angry that he wasn't trustworthy.
Monique claims that the situation came to a head the morning Tony disappeared.
The phone is going off, and she is compelled by the mistrust to look at the phone. And it is a text.
Monique says the text was from one Kim Chapman.
Monique said in her statement that she was tired of being played around with.
She couldn't take it no more. She was just real jealous.
She grabbed the phone and left Tony's house while he was in the shower and jumped in her car.
She was driving to her house while on the phone with Kim, and by the time she pulled into her garage, she was boiling mad.
Who the hell is this? While Monique is having this conversation with Kim, she spots Tony in her rearview mirror. He's caught up to her and wants his phone back.
Give me the damn phone. Give me the damn phone. I'm not playing with you, I'm serious. Give me the damn phone.
According to Monique, that's when Tony lunged at her.
She doesn't think he's coming for the phone. She thinks he's coming for her.
She described it, Tony hit her this time.
Get out the car!
Monique claims Tony's aggressive behavior was so terrifying that she feared for her life. That's when she reached for Tony's .40.
She remembers the first shot, and that's about all she remembers.
I'm so scared.
She asserts she acted in self-defense.
But if Monique had truly acted in self-defense, why is this the first time detectives are hearing this story?
From her perspective, because Tony was a police officer, she was afraid to go and confess to the same people that he worked with.
Monique says that in a panic, she turned to the only person she could think of, her son from a previous marriage, 16-year-old Donald Wallace.
Monique enlists the help of her son to remove Tony's body.
Son, an accomplice to that act. I mean, what a horrible thing to do to your 16-year-old.
Detectives push Monique to tell them where Tony's body is. Monique does them one better. She takes them to the East Memphis apartment complex where she and her son Donald abandoned the vehicle.
They placed her in the squad car, and she took them directly to Tony's Lexus. And the body was in the trunk of that vehicle.
They backed it in so no one would notice the license plates.
That body had been sitting there for 4 days in this Memphis heat, and it was highly deformed.
While CSIs process the car, detectives break the tragic news to Tony's family.
The police department came over there and told her that Monique Johnson has confessed to what happened.
Mother Hay was devastated. You know, so many hopes and dreams are lost when your child is gone and you know he's not going to come back, and it's especially when it's due to violence. It just hurts more.
With Monique's confession, this deputy jailer now finds herself behind bars, though she doesn't expect to be there for long.
She remained adamant that this was purely a case of self-defense and that she was the victim, not Tony.
Threatens to turn the whole case upside down.
It's so inexcusable. It's not just the public doesn't understand, nobody understands.
On Friday, September 8th, 2006, in a Memphis police station, Monique Johnson confessed to shooting her boyfriend, police officer Tony Hayes, in a heated argument inside the garage of her home. A shooting Monique insists she only committed in self-defense.
She claims he lunged at her, struck her, attacked her, and she defended herself.
Tony's body, her 16-year-old son, Donald.
Your mother told us that you helped her carry Tony's body.
Donald, because of that, at this point, we're going to be charging you with accessory after the fact, okay? However, if you're willing to cooperate with us, there's a chance that we can get you off or help at least cut you a deal.
Okay.
Donald starts by telling detectives where to find the gun used in the shooting. It's in a garbage dumpster at an East Memphis apartment complex.
It was Tony's personal weapon, a .40 caliber pistol.
But that isn't all Donald tells police. He also makes a chilling revelation about the hours following Tony.
Monique and her son left. They went to TGI Fridays, and then they went to a movie with some family members and saw snakes on a plane.
She went to dinner and a movie and enjoyed herself while her supposed boyfriend is starting to rot.
Was this the behavior simply of a woman in shock? Or was Monique actively trying to establish an alibi for herself in order to throw police off her trail? What Donald says next gives investigators a possible clue. In fact, he claims he was in the house at the time of the shooting.
Mom? He hears a series of what has happened to his mother.
Mom, what's going on? What did you do to him?
He eventually gets into the bedroom and discovers his mother, frantic by that point, and Tony lying on the floor bleeding.
The significance of that statement is that it directly contradicts Monique's version of events. She claims the shooting took place in the garage.
Police execute a search warrant of Monique's home, but at first there seems to be a problem with young Donald's story.
There was no blood up in that bathroom or bedroom, no bullets.
But as investigators take a closer look at the scene, they spot something unusual about the doors leading to the bathroom.
You could tell that there had been one of the doors replaced in her home.
Detectives confront Monique about the new doors in her house, as well as the discrepancy between Donald's statement and her own version of what happened. Once again, Monique changes her story. She now claims that her fight began in the garage, but ended inside the house.
That whirlwind proceeds into the house. Tony's following her.
Monique says she fled to the safety of her master bedroom, but Tony forced his way inside.
He slams the door, locks it, and she feels a fist hit her in the back of the head.
Monique claims that before she knew what was, but Tony didn't stop coming for her.
She's really getting scared, and she's telling him, Tony, just leave me alone, Tony, go. And he's coming into the bathroom towards her. Finally, she finds her way back to her master closet, just behind the bathroom, and that's where her gun is.
She felt like she had nowhere to hide, nowhere to go, and nothing to do other than to defend herself.
After the first shot, she describes herself as going into a state of shock. She's unable to really accurately describe the physicality of what happened, the number of bullets that come out of the gun.
In the aftermath that followed, Monique says she noticed a
homes in the neighborhood and took one of the doors out of another model home and brought it and put it back on her bathroom door.
All the while, Monique's son was helping her do this.
Just grab his feet and help me.
But Monique insists that she only concocted her first story to try to minimize her son's role in the shooting.
She doesn't want Donald involved. She doesn't want him to go to jail. She wanted him out of it.
She was a mother trying to protect her son.
For Memphis authorities, Monique's shifting story casts serious doubt on her claims of self-defense.
Her story keeps changing. First, the argument and the shooting take place in the garage.
Autopsy report, and it casts even more doubt over Monique's statement.
He was shot 6 times. 4 bullets entered through his back, 1 through his chest, and 1 through his head at a downward angle. This woman, who's 5'6", was supposedly cowering from a 6'1" man.
4 shots in the back, 1 in the head at downward projectile. So what does that look like? It looks like she's standing over him, executing him, and 1 in the chest.
There was no doubt in the state's mind that this was a premeditated murder.
Since the statement from Monique's son Donald helped investigators get closer to the truth,
Diversion for his role, and he was really given a great opportunity to move forward with his life.
But prosecutors plan to pursue Monique with the full force of the law. On February 9th, 2007, Monique Johnson is indicted on first-degree murder charges.
If she was convicted, she could spend the rest of her life in prison.
But was this truly the slam-dunk case that prosecutors believed? Or was Monique Johnson and her defense team saving the best version of her ever-changing story for last?
Everyone, again, they rushed to judgment. And all we could say was, you just wait until you hear the full story.
The last time that I spoke with Tony, we spoke for about 45 minutes. And during that 45 minutes, Monique texted and called him about 6 times. And I can remember him telling me she's very needy. She needs a lot of my time. Tony described her as being overwhelming, but I didn't ever let it run across my mind that she would be capable of doing something like that.
In Memphis, Monique Johnson insists she acted in self-defense when she shot and killed her boyfriend, police officer Tony Hayes. But prosecutors believe Monique murdered Tony in cold blood.
Johnson was the victim, the perpetrator, or both of intimate partner violence.
Before the case even makes it to trial, sparring begins between the prosecution and defense. At a pretrial hearing, Monique's legal team tries to keep crime scene photos out of court.
The pictures that were taken of the car and the trunk when they opened it and found Tony Hayes there were particularly graphic. And it was the state's contention that it was essential that the jury see these pictures, because this is in fact what she did to him.
Nothing to do with how Tony was murdered, and were just the byproduct of decomposition in the sweltering Memphis heat.
We were able to keep some of those pictures out because they were pretty nasty and pretty ugly.
The judge did not let any pictures of his body to go to the jury. I knew that was going to hurt us with the jury because pictures speak 1,000 words and jurors want to see them.
On February 12, 2008, Monique Johnson's murder trial gets underway inside a packed Shelby County courtroom.
It's a case that's captured the public's fascination. There's a correctional officer. You'd expect them to behave better.
In their opening statements, prosecutors portray Monique as a scorned, jealous lover who was out for revenge against her two-timing boyfriend.
Tony did have a reputation for playing around with women, and I don't think she wanted to be played with. She was angry.
So angry, in fact, that when Monique discovered Kim Chapman's text message on September 4th, 2006, the beautiful femme fatale concocted a plan to exact the ultimate revenge against her unfaithful boyfriend.
The state feels like Monique stated to trap him back in her bedroom.
Tony was shot 6 times, including a round that was fired in a downward trajectory. As far as the state was concerned, that seriously undermined Monique's story of self-defense.
Then there's Monique's evasive actions in the aftermath of the shooting. She lied to police, she hid his body and the weapon used to kill him, and cleaned up the scene.
But Monique's defense team asserts their client did have a legitimate reason to be scared of Tony Hayes that morning.
The defense team essentially stated that she was a battered woman and was acting in self-defense.
She said maybe 3 months into this next episode, and eventually it was more frequent.
To bolster their claims of abuse, the defense calls several members of Monique's family to the witness stand.
They testified that they had seen marks on her neck and on her thighs.
But for prosecutors, as well as Tony's friends and family, the abuse allegations don't hold much water.
The reason Monique said that she pulled the trigger, that my uncle was abusive, but no police report on domestic violence or nothing like that ever happened.
I knew Tony for 32 years. I never knew him to ever hit a lady. I think Monique was just trying to come up with a defense.
In fact, prosecutors to a report Tony filed against her in May of 2006.
In a fit of jealous rage, Monique cut Tony's clothes, carved obscenities into his headboard and into the side of his car, cut the electrical cords on his appliances, and poured baby oil into his shoes.
Tony did call police, though he didn't go forward with charges.
So it was clear in the state's mind that he was the victim. He was the one who was being psychologically abused.
So was Monique Johnson a violent and vindictive lover like prosecutors claim? Or is she, as the defense suggests, a victim of abuse? On Valentine's Day,
Very concerned that Monique probably should not take the stand. But in trying to establish self-defense, the jury would need to hear from Monique. They would need to understand her mental state.
She would start crying when presented with certain things, like her prior vandalism. She would go, well, you know, he just did so much to make me so angry, and I felt like I could never be free of him. And it was all her being oppressed.
I would ask her, did you love Tony? And she would start bawling and say, yeah, I loved him. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want him to die. It became someone who was in love with Tony and didn't know how to get away from it.
But who would the jury find more credible? Monique and her emotional testimony, or the state and its physical and circumstantial evidence? On February 15th, they hand down their verdict.
She wasn't found guilty of first-degree murder, but a lesser charge of reckless homicide, which carries a 2 to 4 year sentence.
For prosecutors and Tony's family, it's a crushing defeat.
It was just like someone had knocked all the air out of me. Really? Did we hear this right? This can't be true.
The real victim of domestic times, and she got away with murder.
For Monique Johnson, the verdict is better than anything she could have imagined.
That was a huge win for us. Huge. Probably one of the best verdicts I've received in my lifetime as a trial attorney.
Ultimately, Monique was sentenced to 4 years in prison. After taking into account the 2 years she had already served, she only has to serve another 2.
And though Monique Johnson is now a free woman, her verdict is still a deeply divisive subject in Memphis. In a story rife with infidelity and mistrust, at least both sides can still agree on...
You never should have been together.